Our club has always been a forum for public figures, thought leaders, and decision makers to share their ideas. Here, we offer access to dynamic political, business, and public personalities.
We are dedicated to encouraging debate on the issues that matter to this city, this province, and this country.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts, and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Simmons, President of the Canadian Club Toronto. Let me begin by acknowledging that the Canadian Club Toronto calls Toronto home. It's the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Toronto is still the home to over 70,000 diverse Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. Indigenous peoples are the original caretakers of this land, and we're grateful for the opportunity to meet here. Today's event is in partnership with the Business Council of Canada and the Business Council of Alberta. We're excited to host a panel of business leaders that are eager and ready to navigate the transition to a carbon neutral economy. Canada's transition will require sound public policy, innovative technologies, and significant investment from across the stakeholders. Success ultimately relies on the people working in the jobs that will make the transition a reality. This transition will disrupt more than 3 million Canadian jobs over the next 10 years. Fortunately, many business leaders, including today's speakers, are already finding ways to train new workers or reskill current employees to meet the opportunities of a net zero future. Before we hear from today's panel, I wanted to review a couple of housekeeping instructions. If you'd like to get a better sound quality because you're having trouble with your video quality, you can click here to switch your stream on the screen. Once we go to questions, there'll be a questions tab on the screen. You can enter your question in the window. They'll be sent to our moderator. And if you're having difficulty, there's a request help button located at the bottom right corner of the page. Let me take a moment to thank today's sponsor, KPMG, for helping make the event possible. The Canadian Club is a nonprofit organization that has been gathering leaders for over 125 years. It's because of our sponsors we're able to do this today. Let me introduce our speakers. Sharleen Gale is Chief of Fort Nelson First Nation and Chair of the First Nations Major Projects Coalition. She's been making news over the last few days, so we're excited to hear from her. Linda Hasenfratz is Executive Chairman and CEO of Linamar. And John Kousinioris is President and CEO of TransAlta. Today's discussion is moderated by none other than John Stackhouse, Senior Vice President, Office of the CEO, RBC. Another tradition that our club maintains today in this virtual world is a toast to our great country. If you have a beverage nearby, join us in a toast to Canada. To Canada. Now I'm delighted to turn things over to our moderator, John. The Canadian Club podium is yours.
Well, thanks, David, so much. And it's great to be with everyone, even virtually. We look forward to the day when we're all together in person. When we first talked about this event, none of us could have predicted where the world would be, where it is today. And I think all of our thoughts go first and foremost to the people of Ukraine and to those who are helping ensure that that country maintains its sovereignty and its security. And our thoughts will remain, and more than our thoughts, with them through this. We're also all keeping an eye on energy markets and the extraordinary disruptions going on everywhere in the world, and wondering whether this is short-term, medium-term, or long-term. Of course, none of us have a crystal ball to know that, but I think we're all starting to come to grips with a reset that is occurring in global markets. You just need to look at U.S. inflation numbers for February out today, 7.9%. It's extraordinary, and that's probably going to continue for a while, given what we're seeing in food markets as well as energy markets. And a few people, maybe it's more than a few people, are starting to ask, is this going to change net zero? Is this going to undermine our commitment to net zero? Consumers are certainly rattled by this. They're not going to want to pay for an energy transition. Consumers are already feeling squeezed, and with inflation hitting the levels that it's at, they're going to have greater skepticism about any initiative that requires them to pay more. Policymakers clearly are going through a rethink. You just listen to Joe Biden out there this week telling frackers, get going. We need to frack. That's something people probably didn't expect from him a year ago. Or Stephen Guilbeault, who spoke to this forum yesterday, clearly avoided the word cap on when referring to what they're going to do, what the federal government's going to do on emissions. So a lot of rethinking, pivoting going on in the policy space. We at RBC are deeply committed to net zero and trying to lead Canada and the Canadian conversation in that, as well as be part of the global conversation. And while we understand that there's a lot of variables changing right now, we remain deeply committed to net zero and don't think we're going to be knocked off course. We may adjust our course, but we need to stay at this. We hear this from investors who want serious conversations with us about capital allocation. We hear it from employees, certainly, and we're hearing it from customers. Those of you who do your personal banking with us are often asking about how that's affecting climate. Our corporate clients across all sectors are looking for serious conversations about net zero and about climate transition, energy transition strategies, whether they're farmers or factory owners or services companies. It's not just an oil and gas conversation. It's something we're hearing across the economy because the best leaders see the opportunity. We published a report out of our economics and thought leadership team last summer that said over the next 30 years, Canada will need to allocate $2 trillion of capital. Now, most of that's private capital, it's private investment to finance the transition. That's roughly 2% of GDP, which we've done historically for major national initiatives through our history. We can do it again. In many ways, we're starting to do it again. And that's an opportunity. So business operators and business thinkers in the audience, think of the net zero opportunity and how it can help Canada's economy grow sustainably for decades to come. It's not going to be easy, and it may have gotten a lot harder with what's going on in energy markets. We'll see how that goes. But whether it's easier or harder, we're going to need more technology. And the point I want to leave you with before turning to our great panel is that technology without people is kind of useless. We all know that. Even with some of us as people, it feels kind of useless. But technology needs skills. And that's the Canadian opportunity, which is why we published a report last month on green-collar jobs, those millions of jobs and skills that we're going to need to really power the transition to net zero. We would like Canada to put skills at the center of our net zero strategy. We're urging employers to think about what you can do in terms of hiring, work-integrated learning, co-ops, and internships to help build on those green skills, because you're going to need them, but students are going to have them. We're urging provinces to cooperate more on labor mobility as new sorts of skills emerge, and people are going to have to move even virtually across the country to apply those skills. And then lastly, we all need to see this as much more than an energy conversation. This is about architects and electricians and about factory workers, about real estate developers, and yes, bankers, who are going to need these green-collar skills in the decades ahead. And that's going to define our competitiveness and shape it, but also shape our national prosperity. So with that, let me turn to the panel and get their expert thoughts on how we are going to manage this transition, how they're managing the transition today. John, I want to start with you, because TransAlta has been at the forefront of many questions of transition, but particularly coal to renewable energy. You're a world leader in that, which a lot of Canadians may not fully appreciate. I wonder if you could just in a couple of minutes frame how you thought and how you are thinking going forward about that transition and what the kind of critical success factors will be for you in the next couple of years.
John, thanks very much, and it's a real pleasure to be able to be here today to actually talk about what I think is a critical topic, and I think you framed it up really well in terms of some of the puts and takes that we're all experiencing right now. Our company, in many respects, was a bit of a schizophrenic one, and we're in the middle of an evolution as a consequence of how we've evolved over time. And this is our 111th year. We're really proud of that. We're one of Canada's largest independent power producers. 8,000 megawatts of generation, 76 facilities in 3 different countries, and 1,300 dedicated employees. But we were kind of a company that was split. We had one of the largest wind fleets in Canada, pretty much all of the hydro generation in the province of Alberta, but we were also one of the largest emitters in the country. We had the largest fleet of coal-fired generation in Canada, as you alluded to, John, and I think at one time, if you went back to even sort of 2015, our company probably was responsible for about 5% of Canada's emissions. Since that time, we've decarbonized fairly dramatically. We undertook a very deliberate plan to reduce our coal-fired generation. We shut down a number of facilities, and as of the end of the last year, we have stopped coal mining in Canada, and all of our generating facilities that are thermal in Canada are now on natural gas. We had 2 coal facilities in the United States. One was shut down at the end of 2020. We have only 1 left. That has resulted in us reducing our emissions by 29 megatons a year. That, just to give you a sense, is about 10% of Canada's Paris commitment just by ourselves. And our next phase now is to really increase the renewables component. And I agree with your sort of description of the opportunity. It's remarkable. I think we've got to spend something like 2.5 to 6 times more than we're spending today in order to reach the kind of ambitious targets that we have around net zero. So we've come up with a dedicated plan to really double our renewables fleet. That's a $3 billion investment target over the next 5 years. We've achieved about 30% of our target in our first year of that journey, and are really proud of the trajectory that we're going on there to meet and kind of reshape the company to meet the needs that our customers are expecting. The one point on challenges, though, it has been really a gut-wrenching change for our workforce. We used to have, just in our operations group, just under 1,900 employees. That number is now about 650. So we've had about 1,100 men and women lose their jobs through that coal to gas transition that we've gone through in Alberta. And that's been an unbelievable challenge. And in many cases, these are individuals that worked for our company for decades, worked super hard right to the very end of last year when we shut down our coal mining operations and completed our last coal to gas conversion. And in many respects, it was multi-generational folks in areas where there aren't a lot of other job opportunities. So that's a really core challenge that we have to face, along with the shift in our workforce towards changing the skill set that we have and even the culture of the company to meet the needs of the future.
Great. Well, thanks so much for your leadership, John, and for lifting Canada up with so much of that, but also seeding a question that I'll come back to on how we help those people transition as the country transitions. But let me turn first to Chief Sharleen Gale, who is a terrific leader in so many ways. But Sharleen, great to see you across the miles. You've been in the news this week with an equity participation announcement through the Coastal GasLink pipeline. And for those of you who are not familiar with the announcement, it's quite significant. This is 16 out of 20 First Nations along the pipeline, and this is to feed LNG Canada and ship Canadian natural gas LNG to largely to Asia. Sharleen and her coalition are stepping towards owning 10% of the project. So congratulations on that somewhat historic move. But wonder if you can step back and give us a sense. You wrote a great essay in iPolitics, I think it was last year, in which you said, you know what, decarbonization and decolonization can go hand in hand. Give us a brief sense of how that works, especially in light of the advantage, one might argue, that Canada has of getting it right in terms of social and political inclusion and economic inclusion particularly with Indigenous people and First Nations, that becomes a global advantage for us. So over to you, Sharleen, please.
Well, thank you. I'm just really happy to be here today to have this discussion. When we talk about that, John, we're talking about an opportunity to really address two of Canada's big societal changes, and that would be climate change and reconciliation. Building back better means engaging with our Indigenous youth, engaging with our Indigenous people, and also into the workforce, because over time we've always just been overlooked. Half the time, we're the last to be hired, and sometimes the first to be fired. So we're definitely looking at ways where we can contribute and move forward on a better path. And through the coalition and through our membership, equity ownership for net zero projects is one of our key focuses. You need to approve net zero projects, and that's what the First Nation Major Projects Coalition is really pushing for, is for us to have equity ownership for Indigenous communities that are really affected by, some of the challenges that come. It just needs to be a necessary condition in order to earn Indigenous consent and social license on a project. And it also puts us in the driver's seat. In particular, it provides a long-term predictable revenue streams. It takes a lot to run our communities, so we do need own source revenue. And it also puts a real perspective on the environmental aspect of the project. There's traditional knowledge that has to be intertwined with Western science, and we see that those go hand in hand. Fort Nelson First Nation, has been involved in the economy for the past 50 years, and we're seeing this become a new norm for many communities, Indigenous communities across Canada. There's equity ownerships in pipelines, power plants, LNG terminals, transmission lines, carbon capture projects, and even the Fort Nelson First Nation focusing on the geothermal project, what we're really excited about, because it's 100% Indigenous owned by our nation. And that's just kind of unheard of, especially when it's a new development, happening in Canada. And, everyone's eyes are looking at what we're doing. And we're connecting with other Indigenous groups that have been involved with geothermal for 30 years. So they're going to really help us build this project in a way that could save us a lot of time and a lot of money just by learning from their past experiences. But I think for investors and proponents, they need to be supportive of these efforts. We need to create more certainty in the investment market. And, if our communities are involved from the start and in a meaningful way, then the investor risk falls off. And that is a path to making sure Canada has a strong net zero economy in 10, 20, 100 years. And to have Indigenous people lead it is where we want to be. We don't want we want to lead it. We don't want to be told what to do. We don't want to be left behind. So that is a major thing for Indigenous people. And just talking about, the CGL, that was amazing. And that's a very, very historic moment for all of us. It's one of the first projects that have been supported and put off the ground by the First Nation Major Projects Coalition and the communities coming together to work together. So that's really great, because the more we do that, the more we bring investment people in, and finance and government and Indigenous people and investors, I think the more we're going to be successful. Canada is rich in the resources, and the world needs to decarbonize. CGL and LNG Canada are prime examples of that. And I think, if we don't get it right, then we're just going to be left behind as the rest of the world. And, we have to come together, and we have to find ways to be able to work together. So I think just the announcement of the CGL just showed what could be done by doing that. So Masi.
Yeah, no, it's such a great message, and it's really important for Canadians. There's a historic shift underway in capital. We're seeing this now of companies moving away, obviously, from Russia, but recalculating political risk. And this is a moment for Canada to say this is, should be almost a risk-free environment, or a very low-risk environment. And what you're doing, along with many other constructive solutions across the country, can help make that Canadian story really compelling to global companies and investors as they think about their portfolio. Linda, let's pull you into the conversation and maybe talk a bit about electric vehicles. Stephen Guilbeault talked about that passionately on this platform yesterday. Coincidentally, I talked to someone in Vancouver yesterday who said there's an 18-month waiting list for EVs. I don't know if that's true or hyperbole, but it gives you a sense of some of the demand out there, but also the supply challenges. So curious how you're thinking through that kind of mismatch of demand and supply, and what we're going to need to ease that imbalance.
Yeah, I mean, the demand and supply issue is one that's across the industry. So if it's good to wait 18 months for like almost all vehicles right now, not just electric vehicles. So it's not at all concentrated in that area. But I just want to talk a little bit about the global transition to electrified vehicles, because to us, we see it as literally the biggest opportunity in history in the automotive industry. I mean, from a dollar perspective, we see more than $200 billion of additional addressable market for us through the transition to electrified vehicles. So we think it's pretty exciting. And just to give you a bit of a sense for how it's evolving, so it'll happen in stages. So we're starting and have already started with hybrid electric vehicles. So, they've been on the road for a while. They'll probably peak at somewhere around a third, a little bit more of the market, let's say 35% by the late 1920s. And then they'll start to decline. And that's because they're going to start to lose more share to battery electric vehicles and fuel cell electric vehicles. Now, battery electric vehicles obviously also on the market today. They're about 6% of the global market today, and they're climbing. So by 2030, we think they'll be about 35% of the market, and by 2040, about 50% of the market. So, lots of growth happening over that time frame. And then ultimately, we think the right ultimate choice for mobility is fuel cell electric vehicles. So they're not really 100% ready for prime time yet. There are some being sold right now, but more has happened in terms of infrastructure for the hydrogen, et cetera, to make it more viable. So we see them starting to get market share somewhere around 2030, kind of 10% of the market, let's say, by 2040. And the reason we think that it is the best long-term solution is because it's a truly minimal emissions from a life cycle perspective, like carbon-free fuel in the hydrogen, right? That you make it from water using solar or wind power, renewable power. The byproduct when it runs through the fuel cell is water. So you start with water, you go back to water. You don't need a large battery pack for the vehicle, which actually creates enormous emissions to build. Most people don't know that it's 17 tons of CO2 to build one large battery pack for an electric vehicle in an environment where carbon emissions are a high part, when carbon is a high part of the electricity grid, like in the US, for instance. So it eliminates the need for that. So that's where we're going to end up eventually. So it's going to go through a lot of stages, which to me just creates a lot of opportunity for companies, because as the technology evolves, there's another opportunity to jump in.
That's great, Linda. I want to stay with you on that question, but we'll ask the audience, remind the audience, please fire away with questions. They'll get forwarded to me. There's a questions tab on your screen, and I'll be happy to raise them as they come in. But Linda, curious how you as a business leader think about the workforce transition and the skills transition when you've just mapped out a fascinating kind of sector transition. How do you ensure that you've got the skills in the workforce to pivot at the right time, and the inflow of skills to make you game ready, if I can put it that way, at the right time?
Yeah, 100%. It's a great question, and the workforce of the future is without doubt one that is going to be way more focused on skills and technology. So skilled tradespeople, engineers, technicians, metallurgists. That the whole field of technology and science and skilled trades are just going to be so important to support a future that's going to be, first of all, way more automated and efficient than we've seen in the past, but also way more dynamic in terms of innovation, product development, process development, continuous improvement. I mean, technology and markets are just changing so rapidly that you've got to be constantly finding ways to incorporate those latest developments, and then yourself be driving the next ones. And the only way that you can do that is by having a strongly skilled, technology-focused workforce to make that happen. So I feel like the days where we need unskilled people are sort of rapidly coming to a close. I mean, we still need them to some extent at the moment, but that's shrinking all the time. And I think that's really important because it means a big shift in how we're educating people, right? We need to have a different perspective to make sure that as we're educating young people, that they're getting the skills they need to be able to fill the jobs that we so desperately need filled. Not to mention the big shortage in the workforce right now. So all of it's sort of coming together to a need for more automation and therefore more skilled people to design it, improve it, implement it, maintain it, and take it to the next stage.
Yeah, it's really well said. And Linamar has been a great leader on work integrated learning and partnering with especially post-secondary institutions to ensure there's a back and forth in terms of that skills development. I mean, we at RBC find one of the main questions we get asked by institutional investors is, what's your talent strategy? They know that that's a differentiator for us. They want to know our technology strategy, but the talent strategy as well. So we've learned a lot, Linda, from you on that front. Sharleen, maybe I can come back to you on this question of skills and especially work integrated learning, because there's some really interesting pioneering efforts in Fort Nelson on skills and trades training. And one of the challenges that I think probably most Canadian employers are looking at is how do we not only employ more Indigenous peoples, but do better with Indigenous youth and ensure that they've got the skills that Linda and others are speaking to.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. It's a very important one because education is really important to the Fort Nelson First Nation. We have to pump in $1 million of our own source revenue to offset some of the costs. And we have a private school within our community that goes from K3 to grade 12, and it's open to the public. And one thing that concerns me too is that the baby boomers, they're retiring, and we have 70 elders in our community that used to be part of our workforce for the last 50 years. It could be challenging. So one of the things that we're working in collaboration is we started up a training committee made up of a couple universities, a couple colleges that are in the area, our economic arm of the nation, DATI, along with Chalo School, board of directors. And the whole concept is coming together to talk about how do we provide opportunities for youth? How do we do more for our youth and to find out what they're interested in so that they can have an opportunity to get a little bit of a background, what it would mean to be a tradesperson. So one thing that we're doing is it's an 8-week program where the kids can go down to Dawson Creek. Their accommodations and everything is paid for. So we don't put the challenges on the families. We find ways to be very creative. They go through this 8-week program where they learn how to do instrumentation, mill rating, pipe fitting, being a plumber. So they get a little bit of a taste of that. And it's quite neat to touch base with some of them. They're, some are pushing towards being a millwright, so it's just really neat to provide that opportunity. And just a little background on myself. I've worked at a plywood plant when I was 16 on weekend cleanup, and it really provided a really great opportunity for me to save for my education. And I've also worked at the Fort Nelson gas plant for over 20 years. So I've been, a part of the workforce. I've seen many turnarounds. I've ordered many parts, to help with that. So just through that experience, I just know how important it is to provide that opportunity to the youth, because I'm so thankful that, somebody extended the olive branch for me and believed in me and my ability to contribute to the workforce. And I think that's what we need to do for more Indigenous youth. There's a lot of challenges in the communities, and they're living in poverty, and, they don't have the same opportunities as any other kid would at, in a municipality. So thank you.
No, thanks, Sharleen. And just your point that your community is having to put $1 million of its own funds in to do something that we see as a basic right, education at the quality that you want, is a real testament to what you're doing, but also the challenges. Linda, you're jumping in.
Yeah, I just want to jump in for a second because I think that's so exciting what Chief Gale, you are doing in terms of bringing young people into the skilled trades workforce. And I just, was thinking aloud here that I wonder if your committee, you may want to include some businesses, because I have to tell you, like, as a business, we're desperate for skilled trades people. And I mean, we're a long, long way away from you in Ontario, but maybe there's local communities that I could tap into that are doing the same thing. And maybe there's businesses that are in your, that are closer to you that would, I can tell you, be keenly interested in bringing on these young people. I mean, we have hundreds of apprentices in our business, and we're always looking for more because, as I've just stated, they're absolutely key to our future. So, I just feel like there's a good intersection there.
Absolutely, Linda. I welcome that. I would appreciate that. We do incorporate, like, the Construction Foundation of British Columbia. They're part of the process, and we're always looking to find partners to help us with this initiative. So thank you for that.
What a great intervention, and that's both the beauty and the challenge of Canada is connecting people across a big geography for opportunities. And maybe, John, I can just spring off of that to the point you raised earlier about the workforce adjustment, including the job cuts you had to make. Curious how you thought about the transition for those employees and for future or current and future employees who may need skills for jobs that don't exist, but maybe in jobs that are in high demand right now. So how do you think through that challenge?
It was, John, I don't know that there was a playbook for it. So to be honest, we did the best that we could throughout a period of time. I think the one thing that we were fortunate with is, our journey to significant decarbonization began with some of the policy initiatives that one of the previous Alberta governments had around a clean leadership plan that would have seen our coal-fired generation shutting down by 2030. So we had notice. From a temporal perspective, we knew we had 4 or 5 years to begin to transition the workforce. It felt like a long time at the time, but it wasn't. It came, it went very, very quickly. And what we tried to do is just communicate as much as possible with the employees, so they kind of had a sense of what the timeframes were in terms of when they would be impacted from an employment perspective. We spent a lot of time doing things like making sure that they had access to employee assistance program, making sure they had access to, financial counseling to the extent that they needed it, making sure that they were able to increase their credentials, make sure that they could get dual trades to the extent that they could, holding things like job fairs, and also really, really focused on, are there other parts of the organization that we could take folks that were in our traditional business sectors and redeploy them. But the scale of the change was fairly dramatic, and I think I mentioned it last time we chatted, just to give people listening a sense of how dramatic it is. If you're comparing scale of a power plant or a generating facility on an equivalent basis, so the same size of capacity, effectively, a coal plant might need 150 or 200 employees. The equivalent sort of gas plant might need 50. A wind farm that would have that kind of scale might need 20, and a solar farm might need 5. So what we're seeing in our business as we go through this transition is a real shift between the amount of capital that is required to be, invested in terms of the bricks and mortar, the steel in the ground to get things done, versus the number of people that you need to actually be available. And I would echo all of the comments that Linda had in terms of, increasingly complex from a technological perspective, a lot of data-driven analytics being done now, really focused on predictions, not just in terms of optimizing the fleet, but also just from a maintenance perspective. So as we go through the transition, I think we're seeing a lot of construction jobs potentially being created. But when I look at sort of permanent jobs on a go-forward basis, it has shrunk, certainly for a company like ours. And, I think that's something think we should be aware of. And look, one of the things that concerns us is our engagement with the Indigenous communities that we work and live with. And, I'm hugely impressed, Chief Gale, congratulations on the transaction that you did. But what we're concerned is as we go forward, kind of the job opportunities in kind of the near communities that we have as we go through the transition may not be what they once were. And the opportunities are more in terms of co-investment, in terms of, being able to stabilize kind of income streams or sources of cash flows for some of the communities that we partner with, and then you have all of the issues around capacity in terms of their participation. But the job piece is critical and one that is concerning.
John, do you think more Canadians are going to be needing to move geographically in the coming decades as we go through these transitions?
John, it's interesting. We were, to a certain extent, fortunate in terms of the transition that took place, and this was largely, in our case, west of Edmonton, but also south of Seattle in Washington State. A lot of folks were beginning to approach an age where they would at least consider retirement. So from that perspective, given the age of the workforce that we had, for many folks, that wasn't a key issue. But for some of the younger individuals, absolutely. I think issues around mobility are going to be an issue. And we certainly see that with our U.S. workforce as well. And my experience has been that in the U.S., they're just much more inclined to be able to relocate. There's just a greater frequency where that is done for a job opportunity, where I think there's a bit more stickiness, I think, from a Canadian perspective in terms of people staying around where the jobs are. So I think you make a really good point.
Well, thanks. There's questions flowing in from the audience, so let me get to some. The first is for you, Chief Gale, and it's around your comments referencing decarbonization and wondering how you square the Coastal GasLink project with decarbonization, as some see it as a project that's going to add to emissions. So how do you think through that equation?
So just when we get involved in projects, it comes from the communities, right? So we're not project specific as a coalition, but the LNG is a demand, and it's something that we definitely need, and it's something that Fort Nelson First Nation is also interested in having one of the 3 biggest gas basins in North America. I think the landscape is definitely changing, where we have more inclusion and more involvement. And I think that the more that we're involved, the better we can make decisions that are happening out on the land. We have a lot of traditional people that, continue to practice our way of life. We have people that never, ever left the villages when the Indian agent came out. So we have people out there, that live that traditional lifestyle, but it goes hand in hand because when I was talking about traditional science and I was talking about Western science, when we had the boom come to Fort Nelson, there was just a significant amount of changes that happened on the land in a very, very short period of time. And it caused for many concerns. So I think by having us involved, we could build these projects a lot faster. The environmental concerns could be addressed sooner. And I believe that, Canada has to get this right. And I said it before, we don't want to be left behind. And by all of us coming together and achieving Indigenous inclusion will require investment and into the capacity of the First Nations to be able to engage. Investments in the commercial operations of these projects. And I think that when you have Indigenous people, it's the truest form of consent when they're supporting the project and they have meaningful ways to contribute to their communities. So these projects, if they're going to be built, they're going to be passing First Nation lands. And if you have the support of the nation, I think that's where the projects are really going to be successful.
That's well said, and I might add on the climate side of the question and decarbonization. This project is designed to displace coal in specifically in Asia. So that's a net gain for the world, which Canada can probably do more of in the years ahead. But even within British Columbia, it fits within the province's climate strategy, which is a leading strategy in North America and certainly in Canada. And then lastly, something we often overlook is it's generating a lot of public revenue that is being recycled, if that's the right word, in BC into things like the electric vehicle program, into the further greening of the grid, in future into carbon capture. That's going to be so critical to the development of natural gas, not just carbon capture, but capture of other emissions. So none of this is easy, but it just shows the kind of the full suite of policy options that Canada has in hand, but that we're going to need to take on these very significant challenges. A question that's come in that may be suitable for both Linda and John about how you talk to institutional investors and asset managers about just transition. There's no great definition that I've seen of what just transition means. So curious how you, when you talk to investors who are looking not just for a net zero strategy, they want to understand the ESG in ESG, how you walk them through that. So maybe Linda, I can start with you on that, and John would appreciate your insights.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's obviously been a topic of great interest to our investors, of increasing interest, I would say, over the last few years, and it's an area that we embrace talking about because, frankly, we've got a great story to tell. I mean, our entire growth strategy is underpinned with sustainability and driving towards a greener economy. So it fits really well from that sense. And also, I mean, inherent also in our focus is driving better efficiency and improvement in how our facilities run every day, right? So it's not just the products that we're making and the customers we're supplying and what their products are, but it's also how we make our products in our facilities. So what is the emissions of our own facilities? And we've got a fantastic story to tell there as well, because although we're a global organization, about 40% of our facilities are right here in Canada, and the majority of those in Ontario. And Ontario has a very clean energy grid. I mean, it's 94% clean, which is pretty exciting. And at the same time, we've made some big investments in solar power. So every one of our roofs of our plants are fully stocked with solar power, and lots of conservation programs within our facilities to reduce our use of energy and reduce our use of water, to the point where our plants in Ontario are 96.5% emission free. But we're closing in on net zero right now. So we've got a great story to tell, not just to our investors, but frankly to our customers, because many of our customers also have goals around net zero, not just for their own facilities, but for their supply base. So, here we are, we can be an important part of their supply base and already be producing from nearly net zero facilities in our Ontario location. So I think that's a great story to tell, and we like to focus on that, because to me, there's great growth opportunity. And at the same time, as you started out saying, we're deeply committed to the idea of a sustainable future and building our business on that, because you can't be derailed by something that's happening right now, to get derailed for what the right thing to do for the long-term future is. You've got to think long-term. That's the only way we can run sustainable businesses, is by thinking long-term, not just, wow, what about this year, or even this year, next year, this quarter. So we've got to keep our focus on the long-term. And this is clearly the right strategy for growth for everyone, not just our investors, not just our customers, but our employees, especially our young talent. This is what people care about. They want to come and work for a company that's doing something meaningful and is making a change in the world. So, this is how you build a sustainable business, is to focus on a sustainable future.
It's important what you say about supply chains, customers. Supply chains have been built for a quarter century on an efficiency model, and we're hearing the term ethical supply chains more and more, and that should play right into Canada, where we're both efficient, especially in sectors like yours, and ethical. So that will be arguably a competitive advantage for us. John, curious how you're talking about the just transition and the full suite of ESG considerations with investors.
I think it's a very similar narrative to what Linda actually described. I think, look, we've been doing integrated reporting for, well over a decade, just disclosing not just the financial elements that we have, but all of the various elements and all the various impacts that we have as a business. When we talk to investors, increasingly, it is becoming more of a holistic discussion. So it isn't just about, what was your output in this quarter or this month, or what were the financial results, but real questions around, you've set a target to have 40% of your employees be women, for example, by 2030. How are you tracking? What are you doing about that? What are you doing about the Indigenous training programs that you're doing internally as an organization? Where are you on that? All of those kinds of things, I think, are becoming more of a topic. And I think it kind of goes to what Linda said. I think it is, how are you thinking about the evolution that you need to have to be a sustainable company going forward from a long-term perspective? And if you're idle, you're not going to get there. You need to actually be, setting targets for yourself, because I think it forces you to begin thinking about the journey that you're under. One of the key targets that we've set for ourselves, and we've recently actually strengthened our emissions reductions target to 2026, just getting 75% reductions from where we were in 2015. But we also set a carbon neutrality goal for us for 2050. It's guiding our strategy. Like they're not sort of casual goals and objectives that we have. It actually influences all of our decision making as we go forward. And two other things. One, I just want to touch on what Linda said, but also just in terms of the investment community, they're speaking with their dollars. So John, I think you would know $1 of income that's generated from a thermal facility is not remotely valued the same as $1 of income that is coming from a hydro facility or a wind facility or a solar facility. So the market expectations and the valuations that you're getting in the market are absolutely influencing companies like ours in terms of where we're making investments and the way that we're thinking about the future. So in many respects, it's ahead of where government and kind of objectives that are being set, broadly speaking, from a governmental perspective are, because they're here. And in fact, it's a race to get there, to the point where some institutions won't make capital available for certain types of projects. If it's coal or if you're heavily thermal, the market is close to you, whether it's on an equity side or a debt side. The final thing that I would say, Linda, you mentioned purpose. It is critical to our new employees. Like if you're not clear about kind of the purpose of the company. And for us, it's powering and empowering communities and doing it in a sustainable way and really blending the values of the organization in terms of the reality of the day-to-day decision-making that you do. I think you're at a disadvantage in getting the kind of workforce that you need in the future. That needs to be top of mind, and you can't fake it. Like it's got to be real, because if it isn't, I think your employees will see it, your customers will see it, and frankly, the investment community will see it, and you just won't perform well. So I think it's table stakes today.
John, you raised a great point about diversity and inclusion, which connects to a question coming in from the audience about how each of you is approaching D&I challenges and opportunities. We've talked about and heard from you about how the labor force of the future is going to be more skilled, much more skilled, and we also know the labor force of the future is going to require a lot more new Canadians, Indigenous Canadians, and women. That's where labor force growth will come from. So curious how you're each thinking about that challenge and opportunity. And Chief Gale, maybe I can start with you, and how your community is trying to, especially get more women into skilled trades and approaching education in that spirit.
Well, it's really up to the individual to make that choice, how they want to be involved. Some people want to go to university and some want to do the trades. And when I was talking about following up with some of the students, the one that was focusing on mill rating is actually a woman in our community. And I also call her a jack of all trades because she just totally blows my mind with all her ability and her skill set. Just seeing her working in the oil and gas transition, and then going to further her education so that she could be one of the ones that's operating our facility in the geothermal world. Fort Nelson is also looking at doing up a pellet plant. And with that, there's opportunities to get involved with spin-off opportunities through the waste, and especially with the geothermal. So a lot of conversation is happening in my community regarding this, and people are starting to expand their minds on how do they get involved? What does that mean? And so when I think about that, it's different because now we're going to be the employer. We're going to be the owner. We're not going to a company and saying, we want to get rid of some of the barriers, to transportation, some of the barriers to education, some of the barriers to the family obligations that come with that working full time. But I think just by coming together, as I talked about the training committee and just bringing people that have the ability to support us and to bring a good solid plan and a strategy forward is very helpful. And I think that's where we really need to come together to talk to our kids about, recruit and how do we retain them to continue to live in our communities. And that's by providing opportunity. I think that's just the biggest thing is to provide the opportunity. And I talked about that through my own experience. I never applied for a job in my life. It's always been by word of mouth or recommendation, and, getting that phone call and saying yes, right? And having someone believe in you is makes a big difference. I mean, most of us watching here today have children, and what do you want for your children? It's a thought, and it's a scary thought because the world's changing so fast. One of the things that, I would like to see a little bit more is the trades training being taken advantage of in the school setting, when you get into high school. And through the Fort Nelson Secondary School, by the time you graduate, you can walk out with your power engineering certificate or your hairdressing certificate. So people can just go right out of school, high school, and have a really good paying job.
It's a great story. Linda, let me turn to you on the D&I question. I also want to add one from the audience. Curious how you're approaching both upskilling your workforce, but also diversifying the workforce. And then the question to add to it from the audience is with respect to your U.S. footprint, which is significant. How are you helping the U.S. advance its own climate agenda, which is going to be critical to how we do things here in Canada?
Yeah, love to talk about what we're doing around the diversity and inclusion side. First, just a shout out for what Chief Gale just said about educating at the high school level to teach a trade or a vocation. I'm 1,000% behind that. I think that just makes so much sense. We can't be graduating students from high school unskilled. We just can't. Either you put them graduate them into university or college, or graduate them with a vocation or a trade. We must be doing this. I totally agree with you on that front. So we're doing a lot in the whole area of diversity and inclusion. To us, we have an urgent need for talent, and that means tapping into 100% of the talent pool, men, women, ethnicity, every form of diversity. We need to be tapping into 100% of the talent pool. So that's been a real area of focus for us. I would say we have done the most work around gender diversity. So, the first step to being able to have a more diverse workforce ourselves is to have a more diverse community of people in those areas. So in skilled trades, in science, technology, engineering, and math. So that's been a real focus for us externally as in conjunction with the things we're doing inside the business, is to encourage more young women into a career in skilled trades, science, technology, engineering, and math. We do it in a bunch of different ways. We run summer camps for girls in grades 7 and 8 in skilled trades. So they come to a camp for a week. They learn about different skilled trades. We work with Skills Ontario, Skills Canada to put on workshops for girls in high school to teach them about skilled trades and where the opportunities are. We've had dinners with 200 or more students and teachers coming to learn about different skilled trades and meet tradeswomen in a whole bunch of different areas that they can meet and ask questions of and learn from. We have scholarship programs for women in engineering. For instance, at the university level, we support 10 women a year at Western University for their dual degree in engineering and business. We pay for half their education and, importantly, provide them jobs in the summer and a job offer on graduation to be part of our program. And I think that one of our most important programs that we've created, which we launched about 5 years ago, we call See It, Be It, STEM It, or SBS. And it is a program that is meant to encourage girls from grade 7 to 12 is our target audience into science, technology, engineering, math, and trade through the use of role models. So we created a website. It's seeitbeitstemit.com. I encourage you all to check it out, where we have close to 300 role models in all kinds of different areas of STEM and trade, and just telling their stories, like who they are, what they're interested in. And the idea is to show there's huge diversity in the women that are in all these different areas. And hopefully there's somebody that you relate to in some way and that you'd be inspired by. And also you can learn about all the different careers that you can do in STEM and in trades, which you may not really know. You might think, I love math, but I have no idea what kind of job I can do in math. And I don't know what kind of job I can do, if I study, science or technology or trades. So they get inspired by that as well. And then the last thing we do, in addition to the website, is take 12 of the women every year and create a calendar. And the idea there is to dive a little deeper into their stories. So get those calendars into schools. We'd love them to send some to your school, Chief Gale. And every month you meet a new inspiring woman in STEM or trades that you can learn a little bit about and hopefully get inspired into that area. So that's probably the biggest thing that we're doing externally around diversity.
We've unfortunately got just a couple of minutes left, so I wonder if I can turn to each of you for a quick thought on what you think Canada and Canadians need to really come to grips with to turn the climate challenge into an opportunity for us. John, let me start with you.
Oh my God, what worries me most, I think, John, about it is we do have a huge opportunity in front of us, but I'm not sure we're having the right kinds of discussions. And by that, I mean, we tend to think of the energy transition as requiring a three-legged stool. And the three legs are basically, you've got to have clean, you've got to have affordable, and it's got to be reliable. And I think you need the nexus of those three things to be able to ensure that we make a proper transition as we go forward. I'm not sure that we're having that discussion. I think you made the point earlier about, what the cost of the transition will be. I think when you ask the average person, they're like, look, I'm all up for this. Here's $50. We're good, right? And it's like, no, it's not $50. It's a heck of a lot more than that. And there are technological limitations to what we need to have in terms of making sure that our system is reliable. So look, I am hugely optimistic in terms of where our country is. I think we're very rich in resources. I think, frankly, the world needs a heck of a lot more Canada than they're getting right now. You see some of the challenges that are happening overseas in terms of just energy security. And I think we have a real role to play, both in terms of greening the items that we manufacture in our country, but also helping and providing energy to others. But we've got to do it in a balanced way.
Great, thank you, Linda. Maybe I can turn to you and then leave the last word to Chief Gale.
Yeah, I think what I would say too, I think your question was, what can every Canadian do? And I think first and foremost, get educated about the climate change and the solutions for it. I think that there's so much misinformation out there and we really need to understand full life cycle, what makes the most sense for us to do and how. And So I really encourage people to do a little more research, do a little bit more reading, really understand what, what they're buying and what's the carbon footprint of it. Frankly, I would love it if every single thing that you bought had a little carbon label on it, just like we have nutrition labels that said how much, CO2 and methane was used in its production. Because I think that people don't understand, and I think people want to make the right choices, but they don't have the knowledge and the data to help them do that. So I would encourage people to do that and then make those right choices, right? Because every one of us owns climate change. Every one of us owns sustainability and driving towards a sustainable future. And we only get there if every single person is engaged.
Well said. Chief Gale, last word to you, please.
I think what we all can do is we got to start making youth feel comfortable in the workplace and on the work site. We got to get them exposed to those kind of environments so they can see what they have the opportunity to come into. We want to provide optimism to our youth, that they have the choices, they have opportunities that they can be proud of, be proud of their communities. They can become leaders and in resource development and construction and renewables and, the engineering world, the finance world. I think about just listening to this discussion and the ladies from my community that are involved in the trades, and then we have doctors, we have lawyers. So I think ultimately what matters is that these people want opportunities in their communities so that they can come back and work for our people. They can be engaged in a project that, helps towards this transition to clean energy, to continue to be stewards of our land and providing for their families and for their communities. I just see that the more Indigenous engagement when it comes to net zero projects is the future, and it's a no-brainer. It's already happening. First Nations are leading this transition. Other than governments and municipalities, First Nations are the biggest owner of renewable projects across this country right now. And I think that has a lot to say for us leading that transition and leading that way. And how do we get access to the grid and those kind of things that has to have a serious discussion going forward. So thank you for having me today.
Well, thank you. You've each given us a lot of optimism and a realistic optimism. So it's been a wonderful gift to us all. So thank you for your time. And David, back to you.
Thanks, John, and Chief Gale, Linda, and John, thank you so much for your comments today. I think one thing is clear as we move to a carbon neutral economy, it's going to take a whole of Canada approach to do that. We have committed people in public policy, we have committed people in civil society, and your visions today show us we have committed people in the private sector to help lead the way. So thank you for all that you're doing, being advocates in this space. And John Stackhouse, thank you for setting the stage and being expert in your moderation. We can always rely on you for that. Thank you again to our sponsor, KPMG. We appreciate your generous support of today's discussion. Our EV supplier, Van Valkenburg Communications, and livemeetings.ca help make this event possible to Canadians from across the country. We hope you'll join us for some upcoming events. On March 30th, Ontario Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca will join us for an in-person and online conversation about his vision for Ontario. You can learn more about other events at canadianclub.org. Browse our rich collection of past events and speeches, and consider joining us as a member to support our work. Enjoy the rest of your day, stay well, and stay healthy.